Barney Calhoun lives an unfair life. He was arguably created by accident. He suffered days of not really having a real name or an identity of his own. He endured being the star of what is generally considered the weakest Half-Life expansion. And apparently, he just disappeared for seemingly no reason with no explanation after doing one of the most important things in the entire series. Valve. Why? This video is all about Barney Calhoun, his origins, his pivotal role in the series, and how I feel he never really got the recognition he deserves. He really is the unsung MVP of the Half-Life series. But what exactly makes Barney so good? Where did he even get his name? Why is his life so unfair? Well, that's exactly what I'm here to cover. Let's take it back to the very start though, to the birth of the Barney we know and love today. Yes, I really did call this chapter Origins. Barney has a history that might be more interesting than you think. To sum the origins of Barney up, imagine your canonical backstory being a guy people thought was funny and the developers liked so much that you got a job and a name of your own. Now that's how real legends are made. I too wish to get a job and a name of my own one day. Just keep watching, okay? It's enough. So let's rewind to the late 90s. Early in the first Half-Life's development cycle, Black Mesa's security was supposed to be hostile for some reason. And by the looks of things, it's because everyone on the security team was going through some sort of withdrawals. But even though I know about half of you guys shoot Barney's on sight for some sick reason, back in the day, he would have got you first. And to those of you who lay a finger on the boy, you would have deserved it, you monster. And so Barney, as like a concept, began with some very, very early tests where Steve Bond used him to experiment with all kinds of enemy AI stuff. Half-Life 2, Raising the Bar, the Valve Fans Bible, explains that because what we've come to know as Barney was originally going to be a hostile NPC, he was of course part of these NPC tests. Specifically, Barney came to be when they were testing enemy squad dynamics. You know, like how the HECU and stuff kind of work together, react together, that kind of thing. And in some of these tests, in order to get a better sense of what was going on, they would set the player character to be hostile to the player character, if that makes sense. So while this was done just to get a closer look at how everything would work, of course, from the player's perspective, this was just the same as having a friendly NPC following you around and watching your back. And everyone really liked that. It's lonely down there in Black Mesa, especially with those early development enemies skulking around. Now what the hell is that thing? Jesus Christ, I need a fucking drink. And a lot had to be rethought because of this epiphany from Mr. Bond. Wrong Bond editor, for Christ's sake. And this was more or less just in time for the massive overhaul the game was going to get. So no more crack-addled scientists and security. Doctor's orders, you know how it is. More for me, and I guess you guys. And of course, no more murderous, treacherous guards. So our new heroic Barney, defender of Black Mesa equipment and assets, and occasionally scientists, can trace his origins all the way back here. So okay, we sort of have an early version of Barney the idea, but what about Barney the man? Perchance. For example, why is he even called Barney Calhoun? Barney's name was born when Mark Laidlaw and the team decided that the original pipe-hitting security model looked like Barney Fife from the Andy Griffith Show. I suppose much in the same way that I look like Yabujin, Timu Mimulus, Anomaly, or so on. And to make things even more obvious, the released Half-Life 1 guards are straight up just called Barney in the game files, which is the same way we figured out to call this guy G-Man. And it was still known and appreciated in the community, for people who liked the show and people that didn't care. Everyone just knew this guy was Barney. And this is pretty cool because Barney Fife's character is a deputy sheriff who is similarly not a very good shot, and is generally a bit of a flawed, but he's occasionally a real good friend, and he's pretty helpful as well. The similarities in the characters pretty much end there, but I always thought this was a cool little nugget of information. But while a lot of people know about Barney's first name, if you didn't know the origin of that, you're gonna shit when you find out where his surname comes from. Yes, another piece of media. Mark Laidlaw, the lead writer for Half-Life and an apparent movie buff, was a big fan of the 1999 Western horror film Ravenous, where the main bad guy, Colonel Ives, is also known as Calhoun. Isn't it great how even our favorite artists, though they might seem so amazing and unreachable, also just love putting references into things they enjoy, just like us. Google en passant, am I right, guys? So this brings us up to roundabout Half-Life 1. But that still isn't the whole story. Barney, as in the specific guy himself, the consciousness inhabiting the body, didn't really actually exist formally until Blue Shift, where they retconned him to be the security guard banging on this door here. Oh, I wonder what the password is. Like, comment, and subscribe? Probably not. "Oh, hi, Gordon." And then, unfortunately, I think people just felt Blue Shift was a little bit half-baked, since it was originally a Half-Life port for the very doomed Dreamcast. And because of this, the stuff that the game added to Barney's character got virtually no attention, and Barney's important role in the incident was kind of overlooked, I think, and overshadowed by funny green man with many weapons. And no, I'm not talking about myself, or am I? So let's go over some of the extra things we learned about Barney, shall we? These are going to fall all kinds of places between the obvious and obscure sides of the spectrum. But hang on, Barney had only completed 2 years of college at the time of Blue Shift and hadn't decided what to major in. He is seriously green, as in inexperienced, not like me, making his journey even more impressive. He isn't an ex-cop or anything like that. He's just a young guy in need of cash. His description in Blue Shift, a bit like the little joke I made earlier, says he is tasked with protecting Black Mesa's equipment and assets, first and foremost, in the event of a disaster, and saving scientists second. Cold. But similarly to how Shepard kind of ends up being a good guy if the player so chooses against all odds, most people's Barneys are not going to do a very good job of protecting assets at all, actually. But they do save a bunch of lives, which I think is very becoming of a hero. Half-Life is absolutely full of characters breaking rules, going above and beyond to do what's right. If Adrian Shepard is, as I said about 8 years ago, the coolest protagonist, Barney is the nicest protagonist. Though Barney's lucky because if the world hadn't essentially ended, he definitely would have got fired for that business down in the Gatorade factory. Barney had not even long completed his proper security guard training when everything went wrong. Barney had a girlfriend or wife named Lauren. On his little to-do list here in the game's manual, there's a cute reminder note showing he planned to buy her flowers, and we noticeably never really hear of her again, which was probably to be expected. Though it could be, to be fair, easily explained by the general weirdness of the story back in these days. A guy called Joe is also mentioned on his to-do list, so I suppose, as always, the real question here is, who's Joe? And believe it or not, this leads us so nicely onto the next section, which is actually sort of 2 mini sections duct taped together. I really want to bring attention to just how important Barney is. But not only that, but how Gordon's story would have just ground to a halt or ended entirely multiple times were it not for Barney. First, I think it's really important to drive home just what Barney's mission really was in Black Mesa, beyond, don't become alien food or a zombie chew toy. Barney, I mean this little fella right here, wasn't just running around blasting aliens, marines, and scientists. I mean not that. For no reason, But Barney Calhoun, without a fancy HEV suit, or as far as I can tell, any G-Man plot armor, manages to survive and save key scientists all by himself. And sure, I guess Dr. Rosenberg kind of helped. And I'm sure I don't need to spell it out to everyone, but considering Rosenberg was the guy who put together the anti-mass spectrometer, his survival is going to make a monumental difference not too long into the future when Half-Life 2 comes around. The importance of scientists like this guy to the Resistance in Half-Life 2 and beyond cannot be overstated. They are the real architects of the Resistance. And like Gordon, Barney was just chilling at work when alien shit hit the comically large fan. But I feel like you don't really hear anyone saying like, oh, Barney was just a normal guy, turned into a hero against all odds. It's like people think security guards are Marines or something. And as we know, Marines didn't stand a chance here either. Barney had to watch his fellow guards splattered by otherworldly horrors as well, just like Gordon. In my eyes, he was basically a kid, way more so than Gordon. And he got bullied by the scientists as well, just for doing his job. And though both Barney and Gordon arguably are looked down upon by a lot of the other scientists, it was definitely worse for Barney, which only adds insult to injury. But it does make it kind of funny when this pencil neck gets murked like moments after staring at you for no reason. Ha! Circle of life, mate. Not so smart now, are you? Perhaps if you didn't stare at me, the resonance cascade wouldn't have even happened. Also, as a relatively new guard, he's probably not that much better than Gordon on the weekend at the local range or in the hazard course. Or even me. I can't lie, the handful of times I have legally had my hands on a handgun, I've been a pretty great shot. Sorry, just wanted to brag, honestly. In many ways, I think Barney is really emblematic of the essence of the series. Ordinary people rising up to do extraordinary things for the good of humanity, like Bob Ross or something, but like more. What would Gordon do? And I don't mean this like what would Jesus do, although it definitely fits. It's more like, in a very real sense, what would Gordon do without Barney? Since Gordon is the main character of the series, so everyone loves him, I thought it would be a good idea to frame Barney's frankly insane usefulness through Gordon's experience. Without the Blue Boy, there are several points where Half-Life 2 couldn't happen. Either Gordon dies immediately and unceremoniously, or he fails his mission. the man of few words and even fewer ideas about what the hell is going on at the start of Half-Life 2, would be in serious trouble. And considering Gordon is basically the guy in Half-Life 2, so too with the Resistance. So let's go through more or less every time Barney made Gordon's journey possible or saved him. He really is there for far more than just wisecracking, though he's good at that too. So starting at the beginning, a very easy example. If Gordon was allowed to just take that leisurely stroll into Nova Prospekt, he would have been turned into a stalker pronto, no question. Or sorry, no. He'd be tortured and then turned into a stalker. And then tortured again. Judging by Overwatch voice, the Combine pretty much knows something is up with him from the very start of the game. Like the moment he steps off the train, and possibly sooner. Breen instantly recognizes him when they have that little teleportation accident. And so if he shows up at Nova Prospekt, especially with no documents, they're not going to be like, "Oh, don't worry, Mr. Freeman, you haven't done anything wrong. Back to City 17. They would have taken turns poking his brain and laughing. It would have been the greatest own goal since that time my brother won a PS5 at a giveaway at a convention, and then missed the email saying he won until it was too late. Stupid little egg. No gravity gun, no Alex, nothing. Breen would spend a few minutes taking the piss out of him on his shit podcast, and that would be it. Literally no uprising. No Half-Life 2 and no Half-Life 3. Okay, that part basically stays the same, but you understand. But of course, Barney steps in to save the day, effectively setting the entire game in motion. Not only saving tons of lives before Gordon shows up, but saving Gordon, obviously. If any other guard would have beaten him to that door, Gordon would have been getting a very thorough dental exam, courtesy of Dr. Stunstick, and probably a rectal one too, for good measure. Gordon would die alone and confused in a world he never could have comprehended, like that mouse that died in my computer case somehow when I was on vacation. So let's say Gordon somehow avoids that situation, or escapes Nova Prospekt or something. How is he making it to Kleiner's lab? Who else could have possibly plugged in that plug? How would he have avoided arrest for so long generally without Barney throwing civil protection off the trail? And if Gordon somehow still managed to find out about Eli's lab, how would he know to take the canal route? Because the city was swarming with civil protection. Where was he going to find that crowbar? Who would be letting the Resistance know that Gordon's on his way so they can prepare supplies and things like the airboat for him? Look, it could go on for ages, but essentially the knock-on effects of no Barney in any situation are Gordon never makes it to Nova Prospekt to signal the uprising and take down the depot. Nobody would have had a chance in hell getting into Overwatch Nexus and shutting the thing down. And Barney, who fought with Gordon all the way to the Citadel, would not be there to let Gordon know that he needs to tell Dr. Breen, fuck you. And during that whole train section at the end of episode 1, Barney's pretty much the life and soul of the party. We're helping him save tons of people. And together, it's Alex and Barney's actions that make it possible to even escape via train. So if I haven't driven this point home enough already, without Barney, humanity as a whole didn't have any hope to do anything but starve. Maybe they get lucky and get shot instead before they knew it was coming. Gordon is, in this way, kind of just the physical arm of Barney's genius. Arguably, the most important thing about Gordon, apart from the fact that he is of course the designated player character, is his plot armor and G-Man's influence. These things really make it hard to wipe humanity out. But I think it's brilliant and ironic that Barney, the security guard, ended up being more like the brains of the operation, and Gordon, the scientist, kind of ended up being the brawn. Nice contrast, Val. Bravo, Gaben. Or I guess Mark Laidlaw. Absolute cinema, etc., etc. Now, of course, this isn't to overlook Alex or say that Gordon himself is some sort of useless brute. I'm not saying that Gordon doesn't save Barney's ass too. Just off the top of my head is that time he saves him from the roof when the snipers have him pinned down. Sorry, I just always found it so funny the way he says that. Like how a kid might complain about scraping their knee. Now, stepping away from what he can do for humanity for a moment, I think it's also important to consider what he does for the game. And I think he has a really, really important and unique narrative role. One that's kind of similar to Gordon and Alex. That is the power that one individual can bring to the good fight. Humanity's amazing potential for adaptation and survival in a bleak world. And I know this sounds corny, but unironically, the power of friendship, camaraderie, and selflessness in a world where everyone could be minutes away from getting domed, turn into a Frito, or could maybe get their brains sucked out of their neck through a disgusting phallic tube. In this way, Gordon kind of stands as the lead singer of the Resistance, the Messiah, essentially treated like he is the guy who knows and does everything, plans and decides everything. And really, Barney is a bit like the rhythm guitarist, maybe not quite as glamorous and worshipped, probably the guy doing most of the work. And he deserves better. He practiced hard, he showed up, he played his heart out, and uniquely, his story has been on a cliffhanger longer than the Half-Life series itself. Probably didn't even get paid. He's just like me for real. In this spirit, let's now talk about What the hell has happened to Barney? So, what the hell has happened to Barney? Before anyone dares say anything about this, no, that is not actually Barney cheering for Gordon when he takes the Striders down in episode 2. Mark Laidlaw confirmed this to be a bug. So I think it's good to get out ahead of that and get into some real stuff. I think given the last time we saw Barney, he was getting on the train well before us and getting out of City 17 pretty ahead of time. He probably wasn't in the Citadel Blast. Or at least, he wasn't in the kill zone. Though yeah, I suppose it's not completely impossible he died anyway. But more interestingly, he could also be in like City 14 or something. It's not really Valve's style to kill off major characters off screen like that, especially not a fan favorite. Valve has a really cool opportunity here to explore what Barney could have been doing between the end of episode 1 and when I'm assuming he shows up again in Half-Life 3. But who am I kidding? Valve isn't going to make an extra game. If Valve does make Half-Life 3, which it looks like they are, I don't think we're going to get an extra expansion game like that, though I would love to be wrong. So what did become of Barney? Did he open a helmet shop? Was he captured and turned into a stalker while we barely escaped? Well, I suppose Half-Life 3 or X or whatever will explain. And the only thing I can add here is if the story is really going to be as controversial as Gabe Follower has said, which, I take with a pinch of salt, maybe he could make some grand sacrifice or even betray us. I really don't think he'd do that, but I have the feeling that nothing is going to be off the table in this next game. Come on, Valve, we want answers. And we want Barney to get the recognition he deserves. It's so unfair. It's so unfair. Like, I already love Barney, and still the guy is so chronically underrated that writing this script somehow made me like him more. How does that even work? So if you're still here, my rallying cry is #Justice for Barney. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all very soon.